you. Thank you. Got in bang on 5 when I kicked him out a minute too. Don't get mad about it. Yeah. Didn't realise there was another lecture booked in here. Standing outside looking up. It's time. So anyhow, kia ora, kia ora. This is the third lecture in our series so far for this half of the year. So we're really appreciative to have a delayed discussion from Simon, Dr. Simon Underwood, about Siwa as well. His title, A True Oasis. I wasn't sure it was an oasis, but I'm intrigued to hear about that because it's the only oasis in the Western Desert I haven't been to. So I'm really, really looking forward to this. So yeah, it'll be fascinating. I just want to extend our me to you guys for turning up. Really appreciate it, especially on a bit of a grey day. And Jen, hope you feel better. And to those online, thank you for joining as well. And we also do have an apology from Liz, who is overseas, so couldn't be here. But just segueing from that as well, we do have our AGM coming up, which is why I say our first part of this lecture series, because we'll pause for June for our AGM on June 25th. Where we will go through the formalities for the society. So we do invite you to any of that as well. The agenda, well, the call has gone out for that, the notification's gone out for that, but also the agenda will go out much closer towards the AGM date. I've got a bit of a draft agenda, but I just need to wait and firm up any other details, like any nominations or anything like that, closer to. So we'll send that out at least a week prior to the AGM. So I wanted you all to know that as well. But otherwise, Simon, really looking forward to hearing to this. So dive in, please. Thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second, everyone. I'm just trying to fix my slides because they're not wanting to run properly on my computer. No, this is going to work. Is that all changing over? Yes, perfect. It's just gone wheel on my end. Yeah, so great to have you all today. Thank you for joining the room and thank you for joining online. As Geb said, my name is Simon Underwood, so I did my PhD here. And I've been fortunate to travel to Egypt a number of times over the last few years, including the most recent trip, which was in November, December last year. And my partner Alice and I, we were fortunate enough to go over to Siwa and explore the oasis there. So I'll cover a few bits today, just a bit of a background about Siwa itself, its location, history, culture, some of the main sites that we visited, and just getting to Siwa because it's a very, as you'll find out soon, it's quite a tricky place to get to, and also just staying in Siwa. So for a bit of background, so it was actually voted one of the UN's best tourism villages for 2023, but for most New Zealanders, we couldn't visit it easily until last year when it was finally added to Safe Travels Level 2, which was the same as the Nile Valley. Before that had been Level 3, which basically meant you couldn't go there unless it was for emergency travel. So if you did want to go there and something happened, your insurance wouldn't cover you. Now it will. So that's why we decided we would make the trek across. It is a truly unique destination in Egypt and is just incredibly remote. So it's all the way out there by the Libyan border. This is about 800 kilometers from the Nile Valley, in the Western Desert beyond the Qattara Depression and in the Great Sand Sea. And you get, yeah, incredibly close to that border. In fact, that whole area was still a bit dicey, and the Safe Travel basically specifies to get there, you have to go from sort of along Alexandria, along the desert, along the coastal route there, and then taking that main road you can see sort of heading south down to the Oasis. And that's where most of the bus routes go anyway, so you won't get too caught out going that route. So Siwa has been inhabited for millennia, but remained isolated from most other sort of civilizations for much of that time. It wasn't really until the late period that it really began to fall under control of the rest of Egypt. And that sort of was enforced when they constructed the Oracle Temple, which was built around the 26th dynasty of Egypt, most likely by Amasis. It was then mentioned throughout. So Herodotus mentions it, and it became very, very sort of important to the Greeks, actually, and was seen as one of the most important oracles alongside Delphi. And as time progressed, it rose to greater and greater prominence, particularly with the expansion of Cyrene up to the north. That then saw it even grow further importance as it became a major town on the trading route heading into Africa. Then the 30th dynasty, we had further temples being built just next door to the Oracle Temple by Nectanebo. And I'll talk more on that temple later. Herodotus, of course, mentioned the lost army of Cambyses, which went out into the desert, was lost trying to find its way to Siwa because they were concerned, apparently, about the rising power of the oracle there. Of course, probably most famously known for the visit by Alexander the Great to the Temple of the Oracle, where he was proclaimed ruler of Egypt. And yeah, then from there, it sort of continues to be inhabited by mostly Berber population throughout its history. In the modern Egyptian sphere, it was really brought under its control, under sort of Egyptian control in 1820, and then interestingly was occupied through both world wars, particularly World War II. It was actually a center base for the Axis forces in North Africa for some time as they pushed into Egypt. And then finally, it was fully connected to the rest of Egypt by a tarmac road only in the 1980s, once again, just highlighting how remote it was. And Siwa, as a result of its isolation, has a really, really unique culture that unfortunately is disappearing more and more as time progresses. So they are known as the Siwi people. They're a Berber group, as I mentioned, and they have their own language, the Siwi language, but of course, growing use of Arabic there. And that is the dominant language, with the Siwi language disappearing slowly. It led to a lot of unique cultural customs, unique dress, unique styles. But in modern times, it's sort of as it's moved more into the Egyptian sphere of influence, it's become a place that is incredibly conservative with its views. And that's just how it's evolved over time. But of course, most excitingly are all the different sites that you can visit when in Siwa. So the one that's at the back of the slide is actually overlooking from the top of Shali Fortress, which dominates the center of Siwa town. So it's a 13th century fortress and it's built using kashif, which is a unique building material they use throughout Siwa. And effectively, they take the salt crust that surrounds the salty lake and bind it with a salt-rich mud mortar. And it creates this very sort of white, sort of globular mass, which they then use to do a lot of construction and using date palms, timber sort of to actually make the cross beams and that. And you can sort of see that being used there in that little in the top of the model of the Shali fortress. Unfortunately, it's basically a ruin now. Heavy rains in the early 20th century, disrepair, and just generally repurposing the materials have led to its disintegrating state. And yeah, so that's looking from the very top of Shali Fortress down over it to another one of the hills there. And that's actually where we went up to look at the sunset one day. But then within the fortress, you can sort of see lower down, you can just see just how much disrepair it is there. And the whole thing is just being collapsing. It's basically being left in the state and just left to nature. I think there has been some repair work done, but the whole place is just generally disintegrating. But it is still easy enough and safe enough just to wander through. It's not really lived in anymore. The fringes still have some houses, but the center of it is very much just ruins. Yeah.
Your slides have just stopped transitioning on.
Ah, no transition?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, what we'll do is I'll stop sharing for a second and I will reshare. See if that fixes it. Okay, is that showing up again online?
That's perfect. I can see that.
Perfect. Alrighty, let's see.
Thank you. Sorry, Grant.
That's all right. Is that transitioning through now?
Yes.
Perfect. There we go. So yeah, I'll reshow the photos again. So for those that missed it before online, so this is from lower down, just from where the original photo was taken, looking across some of the ruined houses and that. In fact, in both these pictures at the moment, just to the right of the hill, you can see a mosque that's still in operation there, and that sort of sits up right on the fringe of the ruins of Charlie Fortress. And yeah, Alice and I wandered all through this area. It was really cool. Just it's a bit of a rabbit warren, just wandering through all these different abandoned streets and that. Very easy to get lost in there too and just run down lots of dead ends, but really, really cool just wandering around and exploring it. But you can see it's very much just falling apart. It's just been left as is. A little bit of preservation work to try and keep as much of it there as possible, but it, yeah, is no longer really inhabited nowadays. Of course, we've got the Temple of the Oracle. So this was constructed in the 6th century BCE by Amasis, as I mentioned before, and is probably one of the most famous landmarks in Siwa. So it's on the top of a Gurmi hill, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second as it's shown from Charlie Fortress. And it's on the eastern side of Siwa. So it's a good maybe 30-minute walk, about a couple of kilometers away. Um, but yeah, easy enough to get out there. It isn't in a great state of preservation, as you can see. The whole place is sort of crumbling away a bit. What we've also noticed with when we're traveling around Siwa, there's not a lot of information that's provided about the sites and that. So a lot of the information that I'm talking about in this was research I had to do myself leading up to it and beforehand to try and understand it because then although they're beginning to build up to host tourists, they're not really there yet to be able to provide a lot of information. So just to contextualize it, so that mound in the middle is Charlie Fortress, where the background of the slides photos were taken, and then the arrow is pointing to the Temple of the Oracle, sort of off there in the distance. And it was very much described as being sort of like a beacon of white in amongst a sea of trees. And when you're in Siwa, it does definitely live up to that because it stands out on top of a Gurmi hill there. Now, just next door, about 400 meters south of the Temple of the Oracle, is the Temple of Ubaid. And this was, yes, yes,
Sorry.
that's fine. There we go. Now it's disappeared. Go. Temple of Umayyad. And this was once again dedicated to Amun. But unfortunately, it's in an even worse state of repair because in the 19th century, one of the local kind of mayors, in a way, decided to basically blow it up and then reuse all the material to build the local police station and other buildings in the area. And so effectively all that remains is this little column here, which is quite sad. You go there and it's just strewn with just blocks that have just been absolutely destroyed. It had been connected to the Temple of the Oracle by a little avenue of sphinxes heading down the hill. And yeah, this one was built a little bit later in the 30th, around the 30th dynasty with Nectanebo. Go. And of course, one thing that is really, really famous with Siwa are the salt pools, the mines, they really are, because it's just an active salt mine across the other side of the oasis. Um, it is something that they like to boast about there. You can go out to these amazing salt pools, but in reality, it's just a giant active salt mine with huge trucks going through. So to find an actual salt pool that you can go and enjoy to bathe in, you have to kind of go off the beaten trail a bit and sort of hunt around to find where a natural fissure has opened up in the ground, and then sort of had the water go in. We did manage to find one that wasn't too far off the beaten path, which was good. Um, and yeah, just fun to cycle out there or take, or if you know you feel like being a little bit taking the easier route, take a tuk-tuk out there instead. We did decide to bike, and that was it's just a sort of picture of the one of the more natural ones that forms. And it was a really, really nice bike ride out there. The only problem is the bikes that we had were really cheap ones, and it was a it was a lot of effort. They did not pedal too well. Especially coming back home, it was a very, very strong headwind. It was a decent ride out there, but fantastic views, as you can see. It's just like a mirror on the lake, on the Oasis as you head out to them, and just a really, really nice tarmac road to go all the way out. There were some very entrepreneurial locals out there as well who had hooked up like a water tanker to a back of the trailer, so you could have a shower out there if you wanted as well. Like a little tent thing to go around and stuff. So they had it really well set up. But yeah, really, really cool to go out there. I think the salinity is about 90%, so it's even saltier than the Dead Sea, for context. So you really do just float in the pools, and it was really, really cool. Now, one thing that I was really impressed by was they had a very small local museum there, just aptly named the Siwa Museum, and it was located right in the center of town, right by Charlie Fortress. And it has a collection of local Siwi art and artifacts from across time, and goes through a bit of the history of Siwa as well. Um, and I have a small library there too, with a fantastic collection of books just for anything related to Siwa. So archaeological parts, cooking, dress, anything you name it, even just like a little touristy cookbook thing, which you can go in, you can have a read through on that. They also have this awesome historic video collection featuring footage from the 1920s of tourists originally going out to Siwa from 100 years ago, and then footage from the Italian and German occupations during World War II, because essentially Siwa became an outpost for them as they pushed into Egypt. And yeah, it was fascinating watching some of the aerial footage that they had. Um, of course, the soldiers didn't really treat any of the spots with a lot of respect and broke a lot of customs, leading to a lot of anger from the locals as well. People skinny dipping in the pools and the oases and that, which was very, very offensive for them. Of course, afterwards, with the British forces then counterattacking after Alamein, they then occupied Siwa for a bit as well as they carried on their push into the rest of North Africa. So it was actually being set up by an Italian engineer who does quite a lot of work in the area, Sergio Volpi. He was there, and I had a really cool chat with him. He's someone who is just incredibly passionate about Siwa in general, and has basically made it his life's work to try and preserve as much of the Siwi culture and history as possible, and to collect it together so that it can be preserved as sort of its identity, I guess, is being slowly eroded away as it becomes more connected to the rest of Egypt. And he's got some local students that are helping him out working in the library, and it was cool being able to chat with them as well. But yeah, just awesome collection of just their garbs and dresses and various cultural items. Now, the Mountain of the Dead is located sort of northeast of the Charlie Fortress. So once again, like a kilometer away, so really easily walkable from the center of town. And once again provided fantastic panoramas out across the town and the oasis. And they have a number of tombs there. So we visited three that were open. There is a fourth one, the Tomb of the Crocodile, but that unfortunately is apparently in a very poor state of repair. So it's not open for the public to see. So we have the Tomb of Nefertiti. If I can get my mouse working properly. Fortunately, I can't pull out my notes. Oh, that would be why. Sorry, guys. Just give me 1 second. Is that showing up properly again? Perfect. Cool. Sorry, everyone. The HDMI cord is not great in this room. So yeah, so we visited the tomb of Nefer which is just write that down. 26th dynasty, and he was a scribe of divine documents. It is very, very basically decorated, as you can see. There was not much to it. It's down a little staircase, and then there was this little chamber just here. And there was a tomb of Mesu Isis, which is actually interestingly named um, for the woman of the tomb, because we don't know what the man's name was. So, there's something a little bit unusual there. Her name was preserved, so it's named after her. And it's known for its decoration with the cobras up the top of the doorway there. But the one that's most interestingly and probably most best decorated is the tomb of Si Ammon, which was early Roman period or Hellenistic. They're not entirely sure. But it had the best decoration out of all the tombs and was very vividly done. Once again, all three of them not in a great state of preservation, but this was one of the better ones. Um, during the Second World War, as I mentioned, when it was occupied, of course, the town was occasionally bombed, and the locals would actually shelter in these tombs, away from the attacks and that, which was fair enough to do, but unfortunately also led to just further damage of the tombs as well. One too many. But yeah, this was by far the best of the decorations, but very, very different to what we see quality wise from other parts of Egypt. So other activities you can do in Siwa. So we have Cleopatra's Spring, which is named because apparently Cleopatra visited there. I think that's just very much just a gimmick to get people to come along and visit it. But it is actually quite a nice spot just to relax at. We went there after coming back from the Oasis, and had a drink, and just relaxed by the pool there. You can also go out to a place called Fatner's Island to watch the sunset across the Oasis, and that was really, really nice to have a juice and just sit down and relax for a little bit. The other thing that's really popular to do in Siwa, which we didn't do because I didn't really feel like trying to kill myself, was going on a Saharan safari, where they basically will take you out in the 4x4 and just dune ride and go all over the place and just jump over dunes and stuff. I did not really feel like doing that because I wanted to live. But yeah, another option for those who are more into the thrill-seeking nature. That was something they really, really tried to push on us when we were there, to go do. So just as a heads up, you'll have a lot of them trying to offer you a Saharan safari. They did try when they realized we weren't too keen on doing the dune 4x4ing. They were like, we can still go out in the desert and you can do like a dinner with us and like around the fire or something, look up at the stars. Unfortunately, we're already at our last night at that point, and we were going to be catching the bus back, so it was a bit too late. But that did actually sound quite nice, because obviously you head out in the desert a bit and no light pollution, so you would get fantastic views of the Milky Way. of course, traveling to Siwa. Now, traveling to Siwa is a bit tricky. You can take a bus from Alexandria or from Cairo. So we'd just been in Alexandria, so we took the bus from the depot there. We just booked our tickets through bookaway.com, and at that time it was around 16 US dollars one way per person. There were some other ones you could do, but we decided we'd just go for a standard bus, and we're basically on one of those coaches just there. It was fine. They had USB charging. There wasn't a lot of room in the seats, and the driver was very loud throughout the night. But I'm sure any of the rest of you who have traveled by bus overnight in Egypt know what that's like. Not necessarily respectful of the passengers on board. They're more worried about keeping themselves awake as they drive down. They do a number of stops along the way. I think we stopped them about 3 times, toilets and drink stops. And then we arrived in Siwa around 6 a.m. And that was early. And then at that point, everyone's sort of getting off the bus, and then you get the local tuk-tuk drivers and the couple of taxi drivers come and sort of swarming around. We were really tired. I hadn't slept too well on the bus at that point. So we actually met a local taxi driver who spoke no English at all. So that was a good start. He took us out to our accommodation because it was out near the Temple of the Oracle. It was a couple of kilometers away. We were just like, oh, we'll just take a taxi out there. Of course, can't check in at that time. We just want to drop our bags off and then wander out. That got lost in translation. So our taxi driver thought we wanted to check in at that time. Turns out we couldn't, understandably. We just want to drop our bags off. And he's like, no, you come with me. So he took us on a scenic tour of Siwa for the morning. So we're there driving around with the Cleopatra Spring with him. He points out where all the things are. And he's like, via his phone, and he's like, now we go for breakfast. So very hospitably, he takes us on this long scenic tour out to sort of like the residential part of Siwa. We drive past a house, and then his wife comes out, gives him some money. Grabs it. Then we go into the center of town, and he grabs some bits from the bakery and stuff, some bits from the local store. To make it clear, I was allowed to go in with him. Alice was not. Alice had to stay in the car. So just a little bit of a cultural difference there. We then pull up to at the coffee shop. We sort of get everything together, and we essentially just had breakfast with him at this little coffee shop early in the morning. Yeah, he'd got the money from his wife so he could buy us breakfast. And the whole time we're like, okay, when is the scam gonna kick in? When are we gonna get milked for something? Turns out, no, he was legitimately just a really, really nice older dude who just wanted us to have a really good experience in Siwa. By this time it was hitting later morning. Alice and I were quite tired, and we sort of convinced him to take us back to our hotel so we could drop our bags off and then wander out from there. I think he'd been hoping that he could drive us around for the day, but no issues, no complaints. He took us there, gave me his number, so if we wanted anything else for the rest of our time, we could give him a call. And that's one of the reasons I called this presentation a true oasis. So throughout our time there, Siwa was remarkably different from the rest of Egypt. At no point did we feel like we were gonna have any sort of be taken advantage of, basically. We didn't get scammed, we didn't get harassed. We would be walking back from the town out to our hotel at night, and it'd be dark streets, and they would say sometimes the car would just pull up next to us just to check to make sure we were okay. And then when we said, oh, yep, we're fine, we're just at this place around the corner, they're like, oh, sweet, do you want to ride? Do you not? And when we said no, they're like, cool, and just left us to it. It wasn't trying to harass us to jump into their cars, which you get in so many other spots in Egypt. So that was really a pleasant surprise. And I think as well, after this, we took the bus back to Cairo, and then it was back to how it was. So it's a real juxtaposition there of Siwa being very calm, relaxed, quiet, versus Cairo, which is, absolute chaos most of the time. Yeah, so staying in Siwa, so there are actually a lot of options. So we stayed at a place called Sleep in Siwa, and that was our room there. So traditional building styles using that kashif with the date palm framing and that. Yeah, no, really, really friendly, really, really nice. Alice loved it because they had a little cat that wandered around. Um, so it was cool. But yeah, traditional architecture throughout. And as I've sort of pointed out, most places are walking distance from the town center. You just got to be careful because at nighttime, it does get very dark because there's not a lot of lighting. But we wandered all over the town, all over sort of the surrounding areas, and had no issues at all. But there were plenty of tuk-tuks, couple of taxis, and there were bike rental places throughout as well. There was a bike rental place in the center of town. And they looked like they actually had quite nice bikes, but we could get free ones to do this Oasis that day to go out the salt mines. Um, and yeah, it quickly became clear why they were the free bikes, as I mentioned before, hard to ride. But yeah, just a really, really nice spot. Lots of sort of sitting areas you could just relax in as well during the day. Of course, we were there heading into December, so it was getting a bit cooler. I imagine during the summer, the way they've got this set up, it would actually be really, really nice there to go during the middle of the day just to relax for a while. So food and seawear. You get your standard stuff there. We found, yeah, basically anything you could sort of get at most other places in Egypt, you could get in Siwa. We found a really nice koshery place, which we went to. But what we did try and do was try some of the more exotic foods there as well. So we did go to this place here, which was sort of like a traditional Berber style cuisine, overlooking the center of town. As you can see, it was very quiet. So when we rocked up, I think he got a bit of a surprise, but was very happy to accommodate us, and the food was fantastic. We also went to another restaurant, and I tried a camel stew, which I'd never had before. Um, yeah, yeah, interesting choices all around. Lots of options there, depending on what you're wanting to go for. I think, yeah, one of the big things with Siwa is that it is becoming more and more connected with the rest of Egypt. So the mainstream Egyptian culture is creeping in more and more there. So over the next, I guess, 10, 20 years, it's probably going to see less and less of sort of the traditional Siwan styles, unfortunately, I imagine, just as it becomes more and more connected to the rest of Egypt. But like I said, there are people there who are actively trying to preserve their cultures. Um, but yeah, I imagine that SeaWorld will become more and more popular as it, especially with it shifting not just in for New Zealand with our safe travel, but for other governments with their recommendations, that we'll see more and more tourists there. Interestingly, when Alice and I were there, I think we didn't see any other Western tourists. There were a lot of tourists from Asia wandering through. Um, and that was, yeah, that was different to sort of normally the spread you see in other places in Egypt. I think as well, there's weirdly been like this growing trend in popular culture to reference Siwa continuously. And of course, for anyone who's played Assassin's Creed, obviously the um, protagonist is from Siwa. But also even in the recent Indiana Jones game, they reference it too. But yeah, took the cat mummy. But yeah, that it gets referenced throughout the whole game. So there's this weird fixation with keeping referencing Siwa as this mystical location at the moment. And if you jump on sort of looking into travel posts about Siwa to figure out what to do and that leading into it, there was always be a few comments referencing popular culture references of the town. So I want to go there because of Assassin's Creed or something like that. So yeah, I imagine that that will generate a bit of interest for the area too. But yeah, my recommendation is to yeah make the most of trying to get there before it becomes too developed. Um, we saw that heading in and was already changing a bit. But yeah, it is a fantastic place and truly just unique in the way people treat you as well in the context of Egypt. But yeah, thank you.
you very, very much for that. I want to go already. I want to go tomorrow. That looks awesome. Really good. I've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments, but I'll just see if there's any in the room or any online that might want to ask anything. I can't see any online, but any in good.
This question is not well thought out yet.
That's good.
Thank you so much for amazing to get insight actually being in Siwa, especially because every time I try and research, especially modern Siwa, it's very difficult. In line with that, I'm not going to say it was motivated by playing Assassin's Creed, but in a research rabbit hole, I was finding out about this, like, the history of like homosexuality in Siwa and those sorts of things, but also how that is now very like they don't talk about it in Siwa. And I'm just wondering if there was anything talking about the history of that at all, or
no. It's something that Alice and I both had found out before going to Siwa, but then there's no acknowledgement of it there. And I was conscious about, depending on who would turn up today, about wanting to bring that up in the presentation, just because it has very much been shoved down and hidden away. Yeah, there's no reference of it. I didn't dive into it with Sergio, the Italian runner of and sort of founder of that museum. I imagine he would have been probably quite open to talk about it, but just with the students who are working now, I wasn't quite sure if it would be appropriate or not. But yeah, no, there's no mention of it at all.
Because like lots of the references to the fact that they don't talk about it, they seem Orientalist and they're not. So I was wondering.
Yeah, no, it's very I think that's that influence of sort of as it's become more connected to Egypt, that conservative viewpoint coming through.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Yeah. I don't know, this might also be something that I don't know how much we know about this, but I'm curious about the language, like the Siwi language.
Yeah.
Where is that, like, is that more connected to like Libyan than Egyptian, or like what's
it's a Berber, so it's from the Berber. Unfortunately, I don't know that much about it. It is a Berber language, so it's more sort of heading out towards away from Egypt, I guess, in its style. But once again, as I mentioned, with it becoming more connected, everyone there speaks Arabic as the now dominant language. But when we were there, you would sort of pick up people speaking Siwi, and it'd be like, oh, that's different. So it's still spoken, just not all that often. But there was still quite a few of the people that we met and spoke with were still very proud of referring themselves as Siwis and not as Egyptians.
That's really interesting. And that's very common in Dakhla and Kaiba, where they're very proud of. I was going to ask that question kind of about language, Berber culture, but also the identity of people in Siwa, because from my experiences in Kaga and Dakhla, they're very proud of the fact that they are from that oasis.
Yeah.
And they're not from the Nile Valley.
Yeah.
And that's that oasis culture is almost kind of shared through the oases that we would find.
Yeah.
But they really do identify themselves as like a small region, a small part of Egypt that way, or not even always part of Egypt.
Yeah.
No. Something from the Berber and Siwan language as well.
I think so. I think as well, I should contextualize like my thoughts and my things about, the influence. I mean, that was just from 3 to 4 days in Siwa. So they may not be completely, like, my views and thoughts may not be completely accurate. So that's just what I saw from it as an outsider's perspective. It may be seen differently from the locals' perspective, but just having been through similar sort of cultural similar regions which have that cultural dynamic of being sort of overshadowed by the larger singular culture from the nation or something. I just saw there was just quite a few comparisons I can make there.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting because going back into a Pharaonic period, I'm of the mindset that the Oasis, the people from the Oasis saw themselves as distinct from the Nile Valley culture, and their regionality is not explored very well. It's there, but it's not spoken about in the research, and that's actually permeated through the Oases as it's been part of Egypt, not part of Egypt, depending where they are, and the different cultural influences, like the Berber culture. You do not see that in the Southern Oases. So I'm really interested to hear how that is quite prominent here.
Yeah.
But you see other influences in the southern oases that way, which I think is something that's, yeah, the almost homogenous presentation of Egyptian culture overlays and doesn't actually celebrate it as much. It's really interesting here that even just 4 days.
I think as well, it's really important to mention, unfortunately, I was going to mention it, but it's when the slides bugged out a little bit. So we talk about the Oracle of Amun, but really that original temple and the worship of Amun in the region was for the Libyan form of Amun, not the Nilitic form of Amun. So a lot of the newer research have tried to differentiate the two by spelling them differently. So you've got our typical spelling of Amun, A-M-U-N, that you'd see most of the time, but they try and go for the A-double-M-O-N spelling as a differentiation. So they'll use, so it means that in one sentence they can refer to both and make it clear. And so that's, yeah, so it's actually really the Libyan form that was then incorporated and amalgamated with the Nilitic form. I think there's still a lot of ongoing research and work being done there. It's really messy and it's hard to actually find the information there because it just hasn't been a lot of research done in the region. But that's also then links into why to the connections, obviously, with Zeus to make Susaman and why Alexander the Great wanted to go there because there was that connection with the oracles and the prime deity in that.
I mean, that's fascinating from a Darklow perspective, because even at Newt, when we were excavating there, you had dedication to Amun during the late periods, and it was a hybrid of Amun, like you're saying, in Siwa as well. It was quite different. It was really unique to that, which was interesting at Moot, quite different to Ismant al-Khalab, which is much more Greco-Roman, but you still have elements of that creeping in there as well. So it's such a different culture. Oasis. It's very cool.
Yeah, no, it's so unique and so different. And I think the other thing I didn't mention, the other part that we really noticed was we walked through the shops areas and that there weren't lots of them, but for those who have been to Egypt, you know that as you're wandering through Europe, often you get hassled to go visit their store and that. And it's just how it goes, no matter where you are. In Siwa, no, they would just be chilling outside their store. They'd give you like a hello, and that was it. You could wander into the store, you could not wander into the store. They didn't seem to care. And if you did wander in, they wouldn't stalk you into the store either. They would carry on sitting there until you approached them for a question. So that was still really, really weird to experience within Egypt. I think highlights just how different the culture is there as well.
Also, watched sunset, we were trying to find a tuk-tuk or a taxi. And we were walking around and you said, oh, if we would have been in Luxor, we would have been approached by about 10 drivers by now. No, you had to go to this specific area where all the tuk-tuks were parked up. That's how you found them. There you were not around like looking for people. You had to go to them.
And then we met. We met a lovely tuk-tuk driver. His name was Mohammed Siwa. Was the name he went by, and he actually has an Instagram page which Alice follows, and he posts up photos there and stuff. He was a really, really nice guy. He also said that if anyone does go to Siwa, to make sure I pass on his number to you, because he'd be more than happy to take other New Zealanders around. So if you go to Siwa, let me know. I can give you his number. He was a really, really nice guy, and just really keen to build his business, but in a positive way and not a typical Egyptian way either, which was nice.
Any other questions?
So just have a follow-up question to that, and I was like building business.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned you. Do you get the sense that Siwa, either on like an individual entrepreneurial level or a regional level, is preparing to capitalize on the fact that it's becoming more popular?
I think so, yeah. I think there was a period, I think they were beginning to gear up a bit before the pandemic hit, and then that obviously put the brakes on for a lot of Egypt. And now this is the trip we've just been on was the busiest I've seen Egypt in the last, since I first went in 2017. It's the busiest I've seen it in that time. And I think, yeah, they are sort of seeing more and more tourists in general going out. But as I mentioned, a lot of Asian tourists heading out there. I don't know if it was just the time of year or something, but Yeah, it's to the point that they thought that Alice and I may have been from China as well. Yeah. When we told them New Zealand, they're like, where's that? Obviously, no idea where we were. So I'd sort of point it out, and they were like, yeah, still no real understanding just how far away we are. But yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, go for it.
Just when they happen, do you get the sense that like, and do like, do let's see what do you also get a sense that they start being like, hey, Ubisoft want to build us a stone circle outside that people can come do the Assassin's Creed experience at? Or is there like not much of a thing, not much of an awareness of suddenly Siwa's like seems to be everything?
I think there's not really much of an awareness. Yeah, there was no references, no mention of Bayek or anything like that.
Gotta get Ubisoft to build you some stuff.
Yeah, no, there was no reference, no mention to it. At all. To any of the popular culture sort of references, but like that's still quite isolated there. I imagine down the line, like if there's like a trend pops up or something, then they'll probably capitalize at that point. But I mean, that game's what, 8 years old now, so I imagine there'll have to be some massive resurgence for it to probably begin to enter into this sort of like cultural promotion aspect.
Oh, thank you again, Simon.
Yeah.
Really do appreciate that. Appreciate answering those questions. It's terrific. Yeah. And thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for coming. See you at AGM as well. There'll be a few that. And have you stop recording?
I can do.